For most of the Church's history, in most Christian denominations and movements, women have been denied the privilege of serving as leaders. There are, however, several women mentioned in the New Testament who did function as church leaders. Even though these women are mentioned briefly, they do serve as valid biblical precedents which call into question the widespread and persistent belief that the Bible teaches that church leaders can only be men. In Ephesians 4 verse 11, Paul lists several kinds of ministers which Jesus Christ has given to the church. He gave some apostles, some prophets, some evangelists, and some pastors and teachers, and showed that there was at least one woman in the New Testament who fulfilled each of these ministerial leadership roles. Women as apostles. Paul begins his list in Ephesians 4 verse 11 with apostles. Apostles were people sent initially by Jesus, Mark 6 verse 7, Gal. 1:1, and later by the church, Acts 13 verses 1-3, to pioneer a new work which facilitated the spread of the gospel. In the New Testament, several people, apart from the 12, are mentioned as being apostles. 3. One of these is a woman, Eunia. Eunia and Andronicus, who may have been husband and wife, were members of the church in Rome. They may even have been the founders of the church there. Paul sends greetings to them in Romans 16 verse 7 and speaks warmly of them, mentioning that he is relatives of them, or fellow Jews, and that they had become Christians before he did. Andronicus and Eunia had suffered persecution because of their faith, and at some point had been fellow prisoners with Paul. Paul also states that Andronicus and Eunia were outstanding among the apostles. This is a wonderful commendation coming from someone who was himself an outstanding.
So what does the term apostle actually mean? Well, its etymology and derivation can be easily broken down. It means a position of leadership in a center of influence, or an post in the outskirts of the central authority. So an apostle are the leaders that were positioned around the different centers in Christendom. You've got Europe, you have Rome, you have Turkey, you have Ephesus, you have North Africa, you have Egypt. These are all the centers of Christendom during the Hellenic days or pre-Constantine. So apostles as women were clearly accepted and used in leadership roles throughout Christendom.
First Acts 21 verse 9, we are told that Philip had 4 unmarried daughters who prophesied. Some argue that Philip's daughters are not explicitly called prophets or prophetesses in the Greek text of Acts 21 verse 9 cf. However, this does not mean that the women were not recognized as prophets. Prophesying is what characterized the ongoing ministry of these women. Thus they were prophets. Philip's 4 daughters are barely mentioned in the New Testament, but they are mentioned several times in other early church writings. The 4th century church historian Eusebius mentions Philip's daughters and their fame several times. 7. Furthermore, he regarded their ministry as the benchmark for prophetic ministry in the early church. Quoting Miltiades, Eusebius compared them with other notable male and female prophets: Agabus, Acts 11 verses 27-28, 21:10, Judas and Silas, Acts 15 verses 22 and 27, 32, the prophetess Ammia of the church in Philadelphia, and Quadratus of Athens. 8. By all accounts, Philip's daughters were highly respected female prophets and leaders in the early church.
It appears that Western fraternal priesthoods have tried to ignore or conceal the leadership positions of women in the ancient Christian church, and have done everything they can to almost obliterate them. However, vestiges of the female leadership exist in the New Testament today, and if you go to the Middle East, Turkey, Greece, and North Africa, Egypt, you will find there college scholarship which claims that women ran the churches prior to Constantine, that men were not allowed in any of the temples, and that women were the spiritual leaders of every Christian community. These communities centered around the temple that temple workers, which were exclusively female, would chart the stars and then advise the political leadership of the community on when to plant the crops, when to set sail at sea when there were no storms afoot, etc. Women were the astronomers of the temple, and they were considered God's spiritual leaders because they read God's will in the stars and in the earth. We even have the Lord's Prayer that says, "In heaven as on earth." This is the ancient temple leadership of women, which have been completely obliterated by the Western Catholic churches and all their Protestant fraternal orders, including the mighty Masons of the Mormon Church. Brigham Young did everything it could to obliterate the female priesthood, which was restored by Joseph Smith, April 1842. So why don't you just listen to what Joseph Smith told the women of Nauvoo on April 1842.
President Smith arose and said that the purport of his being present on the occasion was, to make observations respecting the priesthood, and give instructions for the benefit of the society, that as his instructions were intended only for the society.
J. Smith arose and called the attention of the meeting to the 12 now concerning spiritual gifts, and said that the passage which reads, "No man can say that Jesus is the Christ the Lord, but by the Holy Ghost," should be translated. He continued to read instructions respecting the different offices and the necessity of every individual acting in the sphere allotted him or her, and filling the several offices to which they were appointed, spoke of the disposition of man, to consider the lower offices in the church dishonorable, and to look with jealous eyes upon the standing of others, that it was the nonsense of the human heart, for a person to be aspiring to other stations than appointed of God, that it was better for individuals to magnify their respective callings and wait patiently till God shall say to them, "Come up higher." He said the reason of these remarks being made was that some little thing was circulating in the society, that some persons were not going right in laying hands on the sick. Said if he had common sympathies, would rejoice that the sick could be healed, that the time had not been before that these things could be in their proper order, that the church is not now organized in its proper order, and cannot be until the temple is completed. Smith continued the subject by adverting to the commission given to the ancient apostles, "Go ye into all the world, and no matter who believeth these signs, such as healing the sick, casting out devils, and should follow all that believe, whether male or female." He asked the society if they could not see by this sweeping stroke, that wherein they are ordained, it is the privilege of those set apart to administer in that authority which is conferred on them, and if the sisters should have faith to heal the sick, let all hold their tongues, and let everything roll on. He said, if God has appointed him and chosen him as an instrument to lead the church, why not let him lead it through? Why stand in the way when he is appointed to do a thing? Who knows the mind of God? Does he not reveal things differently from what we expect? He remarked that he was continually rising, although he had everything bearing him down, standing in his way and opposing. After all, he always comes out right in the end. Respecting the female laying on hands, he further remarked, there could be no devil in it if God gave his sanction by healing, that there could be no more sin in any female laying hands on the sick than in wetting the face with water, that it is no sin for any body to do it that has faith, or if the sick has faith to be healed by the administration. He reproved those that were disposed to find fault with the management of concerns, saying if he undertook to lead the church he would lead it right, that he calculates to organize the church in proper order. And President Smith continued by speaking of the difficulties he had to surmount ever since the commencement of the work in consequence of aspiring men, great big elders as he called them, who had caused him much trouble, whom he had taught in the private council, and they would go forth into the world and proclaim the things he had taught them, as their own revelations said. The same aspiring disposition will be in this society, and must be guarded against, that every person should stand and act in the place appointed, and thus sanctify the society and get it pure. He said he had been trampled underfoot by aspiring elders, for all were infected with that spirit. For instance, Parley Pratt Ordains Hyde and J. Own E. Page had been aspiring. They could not be exalted, but must run away as though the care and authority of the church were vested with them. He said we had a subtle devil to deal with, and could only curb him by being humble. He said as he had this opportunity he was going to instruct the society and point out the way for them to conduct, that they might act according to the will of God, that he did not know as he should have many opportunities of teaching them. That they were going to be left to themselves, they would not long have him to instruct them, that the church would not have his instruction long, and the world would not be troubled with him a great while, and would not have his teachings. He spoke of delivering the keys to this society and to the church, that according to his prayers God had appointed him elsewhere. He exhorted the sisters always to concentrate their faith and prayers for, and place confidence in those whom God has appointed to honor, whom God has placed at the head to lead, that we should arm them with our prayers, that the keys of the kingdom are about to be given to them, that they may be able to detect everything false as well as to the elders. He said if one member becomes corrupt and you know it, you must immediately put it away. The sympathies of the heads of the church have induced them to bear with those that were corrupt, in consequence of which all become contaminated. You must put down iniquity, and by your good example provoke the elders to good works, if you do right. No danger of going too fast. He said he did not care how fast we run in the path of virtue. Resist evil, and there is no danger. God, men, angels, and devils can't condemn those that resist everything that is evil, as well might the devil seek to dethrone Jehovah, as that soul that resists everything that is evil. The charitable society, this is according to your natures. It is natural for females to have feelings of charity. You are now placed in a situation, where you can act according to those sympathies which God has planted in your bosoms. If you live up to these principles, how great and glorious! If you live up to your privilege, the angels cannot be restrained from being your associates. Females, if they are pure and innocent, can come into the presence of God, for what is more pleasing to God than innocence? You must be innocent, or you cannot come up before God. If we would come before God, let us be pure ourselves. The devil has great power. He will so transform things too as to make one gape at those who are doing the will of God. You need not be tearing men for their deeds, but let the weight of innocence be felt, which is more mighty than a millstone hung about the neck. Not war, not jangle, not contradiction, but meekness, love, purity, these are the things that should magnify us. Achan must be brought to light. Iniquity must be purged out. Then the veil will be rent and the blessings of heaven will flow down. They will roll down like the Mississippi River. This society shall have power to command queens in their midst. I now deliver it as a prophecy that before 10 years shall roll round, the queens of the earth shall come and pay their respects to this society. They shall come with their millions and shall contribute of their abundance for the relief of the poor. If you will be pure, nothing can hinder. After this instruction, you will be responsible for your own sins. It is an honor to save yourselves. All are responsible to save themselves. Smith, after reading from the above-mentioned chapter, continued to give instruction respecting the order of God, as established in the church, saying every one should aspire only to magnify his own office and He then commenced reading the 13th chapter, though I speak with the tongues of men, and said don't be limited in your views with regard to your neighbor's virtues, but be limited towards your own virtues, and not think yourselves more righteous than others. You must enlarge your souls toward others if you would do like Jesus and carry your fellow creatures to Abram's bosom. He said he had manifested long-suffering, and we must do so too. Smith then read, though I have the gift of prophecy, and he then said, though one should become mighty, do great things, overturn mountains, and should then turn to eat and drink with the drunken, all former deeds would not save him, but he would go to destruction. As you increase in innocence and virtue, as you increase in goodness, let your hearts expand, let them be enlarged towards others. You must be long-suffering and bear with the faults and errors of mankind. How precious are the souls of men! The female part of community are apt to be contracted in their views. You must not be contracted, but you must be liberal in your feelings. Let this society teach how to act towards husbands, to treat them with mildness and affection. When a man is borne down with trouble, when he is perplexed, if he can meet a smile, an argument, if he can meet with mildness, it will calm down his soul and soothe his feelings. When the mind is going to despair, it needs a solace. This society is to get instruction through the order which God has established, through the medium of those appointed to lead, and I now turn the key to you in the name of God, and this society shall rejoice, and knowledge and intelligence shall flow down from this time. This is the beginning of better days to this society. When you go home, never give a cross word, but let kindness, charity, and love crown your works henceforward. Don't envy sinners, have mercy on them, God will destroy them. Let your labors be confined mostly to those around you in your own circle. As far as knowledge is concerned, it may extend to all the world, but your administrations should be confined to the circle of your immediate acquaintance, and more especially to the members of the society. Those ordained to lead the society are authorized to appoint to different offices as the circumstances shall require. If any have a matter to reveal, let it be in your own tongue. Do not indulge too much in the gift of tongues, or the devil will take advantage of the innocent. You may speak in tongues for your comfort, but I lay this down for a rule that if anybody is taught by the gift of tongues, it is not to be received for doctrine. Then offered instruction respecting the propriety of females administering to the sick by the laying on of hands, said it was according to revelation, and said he never was plagued in similar circumstances and never had given the same instruction. He closed his instructions by expressing his satisfaction in improving the opportunity. The Spirit of the Lord was poured out in a very powerful manner, never to be forgotten by those present on that interesting occasion.
Throughout Christendom.